Hello and welcome to Mindful Mondays. Today we're talking about fasting and prayer. Our church a couple of times a year takes a little change of pace, and we have a few days of prayer and fasting. So what is fasting? Well, fasting is cutting something out. Most typically we think of it as pertaining to food and drink. Some people cut out food and only take in juice and water, or maybe only water. Some people do what's called a Daniel fast, referring to Daniel in the Old Testament, in which they basically live on vegetables for the duration. Some fasts cut off all food and all water, and obviously those fasts have to be pretty brief in nature due to the complete closing everything off. But it doesn't only have to be food, though. Some people cut out TV or social media, or they cut out all electronics. You can choose something to fast from. But what is the point of fasting with prayer? One very simple practicality is this: you can use all the time that you'd have used shopping for food, cooking food, eating food, putting away food, doing the dishes, all of that, or the time you would have spent consuming whatever else it is that you're fasting from. You can use all that time to pray instead. So fasting opens up big blocks of normally food-related time or normally social media-related time, whatever you're fasting from. But it's more than just that. Fasting is a statement that we make to God. We're saying, I want you more than I want food. I'm so desperate to be closer to you that I am setting food aside and pursuing you instead. The feeling of hunger and need and want that we experience while fasting may drive us to different places emotionally with God than we would otherwise experience when we're just totally physically satisfied. And it's been my experience that with more prolonged fasting, it leaves me more sensitive to the spiritual realm. I don't realize how dull and unperceptive I have been spiritually until I get into fasting mode, and then that clarity comes. I'm just more awake, more perceptive. Sometimes we fast while praying for an answer to a question. We're effectively saying to God, I desire this answer from you more than I desire sustenance for my body. And sometimes we fast just to experience more of God. In other words, God is the thing that we want more than sustenance. So it's important to note that fasting is not a thing we do to bully God into giving us what we want. We're not putting God's arm behind his back by fasting. And we also have to remember that Scripture warns us that fasting is a private matter between you and God. So Matthew chapter 6, verses 16 through 18 says this: And when you fast, don't make it obvious as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled, so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that is the only reward they will ever get. But when you fast, comb your hair and wash your face, and then no one will notice that you are fasting except your Father, who knows what you do in private. And your Father, who sees everything, will reward you. I think the modern day version of this would be something like, don't Instagram your fast. Don't vague book about your discomfort while fasting. This is not a spectator sport. When I got interested in fasting, a Bible study popped up at my parents' church. And so I went with my mom. And the teacher told us that no matter how much he might teach us about fasting, how much study we might do, how much learning we might do, there are things that you can never understand about fasting until you step out and you try it. And I can testify he is really right about that. If you need a little help to get started with fasting, if you're interested, I recommend a short, easy book. It's the book that Bible study I first went through used, and it helped me greatly. And it's called 7 Basic Steps to Successful Prayer and Fasting. And it's by Bill Bright. So I really recommend that. It's very practical. It's a tiny little short book. You can get to it quickly. So that's all for this episode of Mindful Mondays. I am challenging you to consider this week whether you might want to try a bit of fasting with your prayer. Even if you just start with, skipping breakfast and lunch and waiting for supper, even just some little start like that. There are things that you are not going to understand until you step out and try it. Have a blessed week, and we'll see you next time.